In this week's Parsha, we find a few interesting, unusual characters in the Torah, and I just wanted to mention this here on this short video. Now, we know the text of the written Torah has only the consonants. Everybody knows that. When you see how the Torah scroll is shown to everyone, you just see the consonants. From a point of view of programmer, basically, you would, to transfer over the information, you'd have to, in most cases, just give the following information about what's next. Either space between two words, or one of 22 characters, that's 22 letters, nothing else. Now, there are some exclusions. I simplified this. Of course, there are paragraphs, what's called Parsha Ptucha and Stuma, different types of paragraphs, closed and open, what's called. Usually the closed one is written in our Sifrei Torah to fulfill the obligation according to all opinions. We write it as on the same line, so we just leave the space for 9 letters and then continue on the same line. That's called the closed Parsha. It's kind of like half a paragraph. And then a full paragraph is when we start from the new line from the beginning. So whatever the case may be, there's not apparently, in most cases, any unusual things. It's just 22 letters or spaces. But there are some exclusions, and our Parsha Vayera has a lot of those exclusions. One type of exclusion is dots on top of certain letters. So we have that in our Parsha. I'm not going to discuss right now why, and there are a lot of different opinions, but this is just a tradition that's written in the Torah itself. Not the nekudot in a sense of vowels. The vowels are not written, it's part of the oral law. You know, they compare usually the consonants to the goof, to the body, and the vowels to the soul. What makes it possible to pronounce the words is the vowels, right? The written Torah just has the consonants, but the vowels give it spirit, give it ruach. On a more complex level in Kabbalah, it's considered that the 3 levels of soul, nefesh, ruach, neshama, correspond to these 3 parts of the letters. The written letter, the consonant, is the lowest level, nefesh, which is closer to the body. The ruach is what makes it move, the spirit, the wind, literally. That's the one that corresponds to the vowels. And at last, what would correspond to neshama? Neshama is a higher part of the soul that kind of gives you sparks coming from Shamayim, sort of. It's not really, the person himself, according to the Vilna Gaon, is ruach. That's the main part of the soul. He's like the rider on top of the horse. The horse is the qualities that come from the nefesh, but the actual rider is the ruach. That's why there are some people who have very bad qualities, but because they have a good ruach, they're able to control them. A person might be naturally, in terms of his DNA or his upbringing, he may be, for instance, very envious. But because he works on himself or herself, they're able to control it. So it's like a good rider on a very difficult horse. And sometimes it's the opposite. Certain people are born with very good qualities, but they don't really use them well. That's why, by the way, we should never judge other people, because we don't really know what kind of temptations and what kind of qualities they have. Everybody is different. But whatever the case may be, the ruach is the vowels. The nefesh, as we said, is the consonants. So what's the neshama? The neshama corresponds to the taamim, the musical notes, the trap. Meaning when you say Vayomer, right? Basically every word usually has 1, sometimes 2 types of musical notes, and it first of all helps better than commas and other types of signs like that. The Hebrew in the Torah is much more complexly, the whole system is incredibly interesting and complex, much better than regular commas and semicolons and things like that we have in English and other languages. So those signs like commas, the function is actually fulfilled by the taamim. Every sentence is split first into 2, then into quarters, etc., etc. So you know exactly where the phrase ends, where the next phrase begins. That's the taamim. So taamim, literally, it gives taam is taste. So it's a little bit of extra, kind of. Just like the neshama gives you the sparks and the tzutzot, so too the taamim. Whatever the case may be, the nekudot and the taamim are not written in the written Torah, as I said. We only have the consonants in the actual scroll. But these dots that I'm talking about on top of letters, they're not very common. There are only a few in the entire Torah. But they're actually written. This is part of the actual text. So these dots on top of letters are actually quite rare in the entire 5 books of Moshe. And yet in our Parsha, they happen to be in 3 different places. In a couple of places, it's 1 dot on top of a letter. And in one place, it's 3 letters out of 4 in a certain word that have dots. Again, the discussion of why are these dots there is beyond the topic. I just want to mention that this is one unusual thing about this Parsha. Another very unusual thing is we have the Taam, the musical note called Shalshelet. There are only a few in the entire Chumash. It's a very unusual note. And the Ashkenazim really embellish it. The Sephardim pronounce it not as embellished as Ashkenazim, but Ashkenazim pronounce it as the longest Taam, basically. So there is a Shalshelet. Some say that Shalshelet usually implies some kind of a hesitation. There was a Shalshelet, by the way, in last Parsha as well. Maybe there was some hesitation with regards to Eliezer when he had to choose the wife for Yitzchak and how he's going to go about it. But with regards to this Parsha, the hesitation is when Lot is not ready yet to leave Sdom and the time is running out. And it says that Vayit Mama. I'm not so good at Taamim, so maybe when you hear this, it's not going to be perfect, but you'll definitely recognize it once you hear. When you hear the Torah reading and you hear this note, this musical note, Shalshelet, you can't miss it. There are only 4, I think, in the entire Chumash. Also in our Parsha is something called Tikun Sofrim and Itur Sofrim. This is discussed in many different places, including the Talmud and Masechet Nidarim. It's a very complex topic too, and there are a lot of opinions exactly what this means. But Tikun Sofrim literally means a correction of the scribes. According to the more traditional opinion, that means that the Torah specifically uses slightly different language in order to avoid something. A lot of times it's in order to avoid a not so honorable mention towards Hashem. Like, for instance, if a prophet wanted to say that anybody who touches the Jewish people is like touching my eye, as if he is Chas v'Shalom striking Hashem into his eye. But that sounds extremely not respectful to say like that towards Hashem. So therefore, instead it says towards his own eye. A person who touches the Jewish people is as if he strikes his own eye. One letter change in Hebrew that makes a difference between my eye versus his eye. Eino instead of eini, einai. That's just one example of this type of Tikun Sofrim. In our Parsha, apparently the Tikun Sofrim is that when Avram is coming back to pray to Hashem after the angels leave him, it seems that Hashem was waiting for him all this time. But it doesn't sound right to say Hashem was waiting for Avram, so instead it says that Avram was standing before Hashem still. And on this I'm going to end. If you like this video, please press like.